Hello and welcome to Lore of the Cards, the series that looks to find the lore hidden in your Hearthstone deck, and welcome to our first full episode for the Knights of the Frozen Throne expansion. Let's begin with the very first legendary revealed to us, Prince Keleseth. And while we're at it, we may as well look at the other members of the Blood Prince Council, Prince Taldaram and Valanar. For the uninitiated, let's quickly bring you up to speed on the Undead Scourge, or at least the parts crucial for this story. The Scourge was to act as a preliminary invasion force to weaken Azeroth for the second attack of the Burning Legion. The Scourge was controlled by the Lich King, who was created by Kil'Jaeden. The demon ripped the soul of the Orc Ner'Zhul from his body, put him through unspeakable torment, and after torturing the Orc, sealed his soul in a set of armour fashioned by the Nathrezim. This armour was transported to the roof of Azeroth, the continent of Northrend. Held in a block of ice atop the frozen throne, Ner'Zhul began his mission. As the king, Ner'Zhul possessed near unimaginable telekinetic and necromantic powers. Over time, Northrend became his, and after this, he would begin to reach out for servants within the Eastern Kingdoms. These servants would help spread the plague of undeath throughout the region, turning the living into undead slaves of the king. The kingdom hit hardest was Lordaeron, which prompted its prince Arthas to pursue vengeance for his subjects claimed by the plague. All this would end up achieving was delivering a champion to Ner'Zhul. The prince took up the cursed blade Frostmourne to enact vengeance upon the Dreadlord Mal'Ganis, whom Arthas thought controlled the Scourge. The blade was in fact a part of the Lich King forced from the block of ice that contained him. After allowing Arthas his vengeance, Ner'Zhul would whisper to the prince through Frostmourne, slowly but surely driving him mad, changing him into the first Deathknight. Ner'Zhul effectively chose Arthas to lead his army as it swept over the Eastern Kingdoms. Arthas would reduce the kingdom of Lordaeron to a shadow of its former self, murdering his father Terenas and his mentor Uther the Lightbringer. With the remains of Kael'Thas in his possession, a necromancer Arthas had killed when uncorrupted and now needed to revive, Arthas brought the Scourge to the doorstep of the people that the Blood Prince Council belonged to when living, the High Elves. While the elves put up an admirable resistance headed up by Sylvanas Windrunner, they could not stand against the relentless undead. Arthas managed to eradicate around 90% of the High Elven race in his assault. Those that survived did so barely, through hiding, or were stationed elsewhere. Which one of these three categories the Blood Princes fell into is unknown, but they did survive. In Undeath, Keleseth did mention he had travelled the world, making many interesting discoveries. One of these was that with the right amount of encouragement, one could extract all truths that a man dares hide. A discovery he would later make liberal use of as part of the Scourge. Perhaps Keleseth was travelling the world when the Elven kingdom Kael'Thas was attacked. Upon the ashes of the Elven Empire, Arthas would use the Sunwell to resurrect Kael'Thas as a Lich, who would be essential in summoning the Legion to Azeroth. The Legion came, led by Archimonde, who would commit further Elven genocide, destroying the mage city of Dalaran, which possessed the second highest concentration of High Elves. Most would die in the demon's devastating attack. Those that didn't would be picked off by bandits and looters who were sifting through the wreckage of the city looking for some easy coin. After the Burning Legion's defeat, most of the scattered surviving elves, including the Blood Princes, would unite under the banner of Kael'Thas Sunstrider, son of the deceased High King Anasterion, who fell during the Scourge attack on Kael'Thas. They would rename themselves Blood Elves in honour of those that fell to the Scourge. These elves were able to reclaim a small portion of the elven capital Silvermoon, though much of the land was still claimed by the undead. The Blood Elves were also beginning to suffer withdrawal symptoms. In order to revive Kael'Thas Arthas had used the Sunwell. This font of arcane power had been created thousands of years ago and had been essential in the founding of the High Elven Kingdom. The High Elves' connection to the Sunwell became so great that feeding off its power was as essential to them as eating or breathing. Upon Kael'Thas's revival, the well became tainted, shutting the elves off from its power. The Blood Elves needed to find a new source of magic to rely on, or risk being driven mad by their cravings. Kael left the city of Silvermoon with a small group of Blood Elves in tow to look for more survivors of their race and to find a new source of magic to feed their addiction. It's highly likely that the Blood Princes were a part of this group. Kael's group would run into Tyrande Whisperwind and Maiev Shadowsong and aid the Night Elves in stopping Illidan from using an ancient artifact, the Eye of Sargeras, to utterly destroy the continent of Northrend. While Illidan was trying to defeat the Lich King once and for all, his actions were causing great damage to all of Azeroth. At this time, the Blood Elves were still allied with the Alliance, and Kael found himself following the orders of one Grand Marshal Garithos. The Grand Marshal showed open disdain toward non-human members of the Alliance, and it would not be long before he put Kael and his people in an unwinnable situation. With a large Scourge force bearing down on them, Kael had no choice but to accept aid from the Naga, allies of Illidan. Catching a glimpse of the Naga on 2 separate occasions upon returns, Garithos accused the Blood Elves of treason and locked them away in the prison of a partially rebuilt Taldaram to await their deaths. The Naga once again came to their aid, freeing them and leading them through a portal to the lands of Outland. Here, the elves would free Illidan from the clutches of Maiev and ally with the Night Elf and Demon hybrid. Illidan too had once suffered from withdrawal similar to that of the Blood Elves, and taught them how to sate their hunger by feeding on alternative sources. In Outlands, the only real source to draw from were demons, Kael and his people feeding on the highly corruptive Fel magic. This would likely play a part in Kael's later madness. Keeping his alliance with Illidan and his new habit of feeding on Fel a secret from the rest of his people back home, Kael sent Grand Magister Romath back to Kael'Thas to teach them the techniques Illidan had taught them. A small portion of elves were disgusted by this new practice, likening it to vampirism. This saw them exiled from Silvermoon, a majority of which now under Blood Elf control, by Lor'themar Theron, acting as leader in Kael's absence. The likeness these elves drew between this technique and vampirism would later be realised in Undeath, the Blood Prince Council and others of their kind becoming vampiric undead. It would later be discovered that when trying to destroy the Lich King, Illidan had been serving Kil'Jaeden, the king's creator. The demon looked to dispose of the king after interference from his servants saw the Legion's final attack thwarted during their second invasion of Azeroth. Though not best pleased Illidan had failed, Kil'Jaeden was willing to give him one more chance. Illidan and Kael marched on the Frozen Throne. Moments away from gaining access to the Lich King's seat of power, they were thwarted by Arthas. Defeating Illidan in one-on-one combat, Arthas ascended the Frozen Throne and bound with his master. Defeated, Illidan and his forces fled, but several were abandoned in the frozen wastes of Northrend. 3 of the abandoned were Keleseth, his brother Valanar, and Taldaram. Those that stood against the king and remained in his lands were hunted down by him personally, and the most powerful among the murdered Blood Elves were risen as a new variety of undead, Darkfallen. Their height and build remained similar to what it was in life, but their skin took on a pale necrotic hue. Like in life, the Darkfallen remained skilled spellcasters, focusing their efforts on blood magic, and were also known to shapeshift. The Darkfallen were vampiric in nature, consuming the flesh, blood, and souls of victims. The undead elves would form their own racial faction within the Scourge, headed up by Blood Queen Lanethel, the San'layn. Second to the Queen were the princes of the San'layn, Keleseth, Valanar and Taldaram belonging to their ranks. The San'layn were trusted servants of the Lich King, often in direct contact with their supreme ruler. They acted as ambassadors, overlords, and oversaw the Scourge's operations throughout Azeroth. Operating from the Crimson Hall in Icecrown Citadel, the San'layn became a vital part of the Scourge. Two factions were particular thorns in the side of the Lich King. Firstly, the Scarlet Crusade, humans that dedicated themselves to the eradication of the Scourge. However, they were extremely exclusive, only allowing humans among their ranks, and their hatred would extend to the Forsaken too. The Forsaken were undead that were able to cast off the Lich King's control and joined the Horde. So naturally the Crusade were not in the Horde's good books, nor the Alliance's for that matter. Secondly, the Argent Dawn. Like the Crusade, they dedicated themselves to destroying the Scourge, but were a lot more inclusive, allowing races of the Alliance and Horde to join them, even the Forsaken. As a result, they maintained a good relation with both Azeroth's major factions. The Lich King looked to deal a decisive blow against both factions, destroying the Scarlet Enclave, made up of the villages Havenshire and New Avalon, and the city Tyr's Hand. After that, he would assault the Argent Dawn-held Light's Hope Chapel. This held the corpses of many powerful warriors that the Lich King sought to raise as Death Knights. Taking the floating necropolis Acheras to drift above the Scarlet Enclave, the Lich King would bring some of his most powerful warriors with him, a host of Death Knights, Gothic the Harvester, Noth the Plaguebringer, and of course, members of the San'layn. After the Scourge scouted out the Scarlet Enclave, they were ready to attack. Keleseth would sit out the first phase of the invasion, standing alongside the leader of Acheras' Death Knights, Darium Mograine. Keleseth's brother Valanar was stationed at Death's Breach, the Scourge's foothold in the Scarlet Enclave. Valanar would direct the wrath of the Lich King's Death Knights, introducing them to the first lesson of Scourge warfare: terror. Not only did Valanar instruct the Death Knights to slaughter the soldiers of the Crusade stationed at Havenshire, but he also instructed the Knights to murder the fleeing villagers, striking fear into the hearts of their enemy. With the front lines of the Crusade dismantled, Valanar sought to give them no reprieve. The Crusade were desperately fleeing Havenshire, but to help them with later defences against the Scourge, some workers had remained to strip the Havenshire mine of as many resources as possible. Valanar directed Death Knights to Gothic, who would give them a portable plague spreader. Death Knights entered the mines, laying down their spreaders, which killed the miners and transformed them into ghouls. After converting a small army, the Death Knights would return the ghouls to Gothic, who had saved a special place for them in his vacuum cleaner of souls. With the chaos in the mine, the Crusaders were reeling yet again. They were frantically clearing the area and boarding the fleet of ships stationed at Light's Point. Valanar was able to formulate a tactic to exploit the Crusaders' panic. The ships at Light's Point were guarded by thousands of Scarlet Crusade troops. Valanar instructed a Death Knight to hide in a minecart filled with resources, placed by his agents, just outside the mine. Since the workers were gathering all they could before fleeing, not paying enough attention as they hurried, one dim-witted peasant would drag the cart all the way to one of the Crusade ships. From here, the Death Knight was able to rain death down upon the Scarlet Army using the ship's cannons, dealing a tremendous blow to the Scarlet Crusade's defences, wiping out their fleet. The Death Knight left Valanar to deliver a report on the Scourge's victory to Darium Mograine. When they returned, the scene was quite different. Havenshire was now crawling with Scourge, and a platform had been set up with Valanar addressing the Death Knights gathered. "Open your eyes, brothers and sisters. Gaze upon the apocalypse. The sky itself feeds upon the suffering of the conquered. The Scarlet Crusade is powerless to stop us. The corpses of those that try only serve to feed our expanding host. The Scarlet Fleet lies in ruins upon the sundered coast. With each enemy slain, our strength grows. We mustn't relent. The Lich King has spoken to each of you. Let his words resonate among you once more. All must die. Leave no survivors in your wake, brothers and sisters. No mercy for the weak. Terror, chaos, destruction. With the approaching darkness comes the end of the Scarlet Crusade. You will battle once more for the Scourge, for the Lich King. Suffer well, Death Knights." Keleseth too now joined the battle, and when Valanar spoke with the Death Knight that had helped him score a major victory over the Crusade, he sent them on to Keleseth, stationed at the Crypt of Remembrance. As the Death Knight departed, Valanar gleefully told them, "Prepare yourself, Death Knight. You're about to witness the next stage of Scourge warfare, domination." As ghouls threw themselves at the front gates of New Avalon, Keleseth knew this would not be enough to destroy the Crusade. Keleseth knew that nothing less than total annihilation of the Crusade would please the Lich King. While the Crusade held their defences, they had hope. Keleseth sought to dash that hope. He instructed the Death Knight to bypass the Crusaders' defences, allowing the ghouls to distract their attention and murder Mayor Quimby. If not even New Avalon's officials were safe, then none of the citizens were. After butchering the town's mayor, Keleseth also instructed the Death Knight to bring him the New Avalon registry. When the Death Knight returned with the registry, Keleseth eagerly leafed through the tome. This told the Scourge the town's birth rates, deaths, and most importantly, their movements. One such movement caught Keleseth's eye. 3 ships had sailed abroad, and he was shocked to find their destination was Northrend. Beside the coordinates were the words Crimson Dawn, and with that, Keleseth knew his next instruction for the Death Knight. Handing the knight 2 searing hot pokers, which he called his persuaders, Keleseth wanted the Death Knight to find and torture members of the Crusade in New Avalon. As their flesh burned while they still lived, no doubt there would be at least one Crusader weak-willed enough to confess what they knew. Entering the city again, many Crusaders fell before the Death Knight, their flesh blistering, but their lips tightly sealed. The knight was relentless and eventually found their target. Reeling from the pain, the Crusader told the Death Knight all they knew. The commanders of the Scarlet Crusade had not been explicit with what the Crimson Dawn was, telling their comrades that it would be an awakening. Only the very best of the Crusade were hand-picked by High General Abendis to accompany her to Northrend as part of the Crimson Dawn. Before the Crusader died, they gave the Death Knight one more piece of information, that a courier would soon be arriving from the town of Hearthglen. Keleseth was confused by the Scarlet Crusade's actions, dismissing them as nonsense. After all, what kind of fool would deliver their people to the frozen wastes of the Lich King's domain? The Darkfallen did come to the conclusion that the courier may be the answer to his confusion. Keleseth had sent the 3 elite Death Knights, Orbaz, Thessarian and Koltira, behind enemy lines in search of this courier, and told the Death Knight that they should liaise with these 3 to find what the Crusade planned. The Blood Princes played no further role in this invasion. certainly not in the front lines. The Death Knights were able to track down the courier who was delivering a message that stated the Crusader armies of Hearthglen and Tira's Fall were making their way to New Avalon. They still made sure the message was delivered to Abendis, a Death Knight dressing as the courier so as not to raise the Crusaders' suspicions that the Scourge knew about their actions. Abendis informed the courier to tell the armies to turn back and set sail for Northrend. The Crusade sought to take the fight to the Lich King. Renaming themselves the Scarlet Onslaught, they would bring about the Crimson Dawn, a new era for their order, returning the Kingdom of Lordaeron back to its former glory before the Scourge, led in their conquest by the Light. Of course, this message never reached the armies. Only those directly under Abendis' command would reach Northrend, and the rest would meet their ends at the hands of the Scourge in New Avalon. After this, the Scourge moved on to invade Light's Hope Chapel, defended by the Argent Dawn. This, however, did not go smoothly. Fighting the Lich King's Death Knights upon the holy ground of the chapel, the Dawn would emerge victorious, and many Death Knights would see the error of their ways, silencing the Lich King's voice in their heads and vow to defeat him. Not only this, the once corrupted Ashbringer had now been cleansed and was in the hands of the paladin Tyrion Fordring. This would not be the Lich King's only tactical mistake around this time. He invaded the Horde and Alliance capitals of Orgrimmar and Stormwind, and though his forces did come close to razing the cities to the ground, they ultimately failed. This mobilised the Horde and Alliance forces to Northrend to end the Lich King's reign. The Death Knight Thessarion, after casting off the Lich King's control, would rejoin with the alliance he had served in life. He travelled to Borean Tundra, lending his sword to the alliance outpost Valiant's Keep. Thessarion's sister, Larissa, would learn that he had recently enlisted with the alliance army. Shocking news to her, as she thought he was dead. She travelled for 3 weeks to Valiant's Keep, only to be told by Councillor Talbot that her brother had not enlisted. He then sent her away. After this, Talbot would recall Thessarion from the field. He questioned the Death Knight, asking why he had joined the military. Thessarion's answer was simple: revenge against the Lich King. With that, Talbot told Thessarion of his plan. He had assembled an elite strike force which he called Unit S. Starting at the Wailing Ziggurat, they would fight their way northward to the temple city of En-Killa. From there, the unit would use the Scourge's own technology against them and attack the Lich King himself. Talbot wanted Thessarion to lead this group. Upon reaching the Ziggurat, Thessarion soon found out that Talbot had been extremely light on detail. It was surrounded by some of the most powerful Scourge forces, plague eruptors, and abominations. Thessarion assumed Talbot simply did not know. Why would he send this small force to deal with such mighty undead? The battle was a disaster. While Thessarion and his men emerged victorious, only 2 of the 5 men entrusted to the Death Knight survived. In the wake of the battle, Thessarion came to the conclusion that Talbot had set them up, but he could not think why. Thessarion continued alone. Torturing a Lich of the Scourge, he was able to find out that the Cult of the Damned, living members of the Scourge, had been able to infiltrate the Alliance's operations in Northrend, rising to positions of power. He also found out that the leader resided in Naxanar, a necropolis floating above En-Killa. With his trusty skeletal minion Lurid by his side, Thessarion assaulted En-Killa, cutting his way through the Scourge and making his way to the top of Naxanar. There, a chill ran through the Death Knight's body, as an image of the Lich King stood there. Thessarion's eyes were then drawn to another figure, taking a knee before the king. It was Councillor Talbot. Then, before Thessarion's eyes, Talbot transformed into Prince Valanar. It was worse than Thessarian had first thought. Not only were corrupted humans influencing the Alliance, but creatures of the Scourge were bending the ears of the Alliance generals. The Lich King congratulated Valanar for his progress within the Tundra. Valanar explained it was due to the powers the Lich King had gifted him with, allowing him great influence over human minds. To show the Lich King his progress, Valanar bore 2 offerings. Humans in some sort of trance dominated by Valanar, General Arlos, and Thessarian's sister, Larissa. Seeing his sister helpless, Thessarian could not restrain himself. He leapt out into the open. The Lich King mused. He had not seen Mograine or the other Death Knights that had broken free for some time, and presumed Thessarian had come to rejoin the Scourge. When the Death Knight exclaimed he'd rather slit his own throat, the Lich King requested Valanar kill Thessarian and bring his head to Icecrown's citadel. Valanar's magic got the better of the Death Knight at first, keeping him at bay until Lurid drew Valanar's attention. After fighting off the skeleton, Valanar was face to face with Thessarian, but the Death Knight was unable to strike the San'layn. Valanar then told Thessarian to strike him, and the Death Knight did not wait a moment, driving his sword through Valanar's chest. Yet it was he who felt the pain. Thessarian did not know what enchantment this was, but knew he must endure through it. He was able to outlast Valanar's spell, driving the sword even deeper into the Darkfallen, and then tearing him asunder. With Valanar's death, Larissa and Arlos were freed from the Blood Prince's control. Keleseth had also been entrusted with important missions by the Lich King as well. Before parting on separate missions, he and Valanar, along with fellow Blood Princes Theraldis and Atharan, were told by the Lich King to revive Arugal. The Archmage had been responsible for the summoning of the Worgen to defend the city of Gilneas from the Scourge at the beginning of the Undead's invasion. However, while the Worgen kept out the Scourge, they were soon attacking citizens and turning them into Worgen too. Driven mad with guilt, Arugal would adopt several Worgen as his children, keeping them in line with spellwork. He took up residence in the Eastern Kingdom's Silverpine Forest in Shadowfang Keep. He would eventually draw the ire of the Forsaken and the rest of the Horde and be assassinated. His headless body buried at the footpath leading to Shadowfang. The princes successfully resurrected Arugal as a ghost and sent him to the Grizzly Hills region of Northrend. The Spectre travelled to Solstice Village and Silverbrook, where he set about converting the trapper communities there into Worgen. He settled in Shadowmoon Tower on Bloodmist Isle, where he would yet again be defeated by adventurers. While Valanar moved on to his Borean Tundra exploits, Keleseth travelled to Howling Fjord. He was sent by the Lich King to Utgar Keep, hoping Keleseth may be able to harness the destructive capabilities of the Veraikal that resided there. Upon the ambassador's arrival, he found a people more than willing to assist the Scourge. Utgar Keep also made the perfect staging ground from which to terrorise the lands of Howling Fjord. Keleseth acted as the king's eyes and ears in the area, and ably helped Utgard's master, Ingvar the Plunderer, stage several raids within the surrounding territory. Keleseth's operation was interrupted somewhat when the Forsaken landed upon the shores of the fjord. After the Forsaken were able to drive off an attack from the Alliance, Keleseth revealed himself. Flanked by Veraikal, the prince strode into the Forsaken outpost of Vengeance Landing to address the commander of the forces, High Executor Anselm. The Executor rounded on Keleseth, demanding to know what fool would enter the territory of his queen Sylvanas. Keleseth mused that it was in fact the Forsaken that were trespassing in his master's domain, and if he willed it, the Lich King could eradicate them in moments. Not to mention, Arthas did not care too much for escaped slaves. This led on to Keleseth's next point. He sought to invite Anselm back to the Scourge, as the Lich King was somewhat impressed by the Executor's victory over the Alliance North Fleet. Keleseth presented the Varikal before Anselm, saying they were a race that had perfected war and destruction to the point of an art form. Anselm had a choice: either join with the Lich King and fight alongside the Varikal, or challenge the race, who outnumbered his forces 5-1 at least. Anselm chose to remain loyal to the Banshee Queen, calling for his archers to open fire. Keleseth avoided the volley by teleporting behind the Varikal he had brought with him. The Varikal fell to the floor dead, but Keleseth would not be bettered. Casting a massive spell, he drained the souls of many of the Vengeance Landing troops, dealing a significant blow to Anselm's army's strength. Keleseth left with a threat: "This will not be the last you hear of me. I will return to spit on your corpse after Utgard's armies have descended upon you." Anselm was incensed. Keleseth had arrived unannounced, insulted his queen, and killed his men. He was not going to stand by while the hordes amassed in Utgard Keep before being released. He sent several adventurers on a mission to infiltrate the keep and slay Keleseth. The adventurers were able to fight their way through the masses of Varikal forces and make their way to Utgard Keep. Fighting their way through the massive forge of the keep and the Dragonflayer pens where the Varikal trained their Proto-Drake mounts, they came to the Reaver's Hall, Keleseth within. After dispatching his Varikal bodyguards, the heroes charged at Keleseth. The Dark Fallen attacked by throwing shadow bolts at his foes, and was also capable of imprisoning those that fought him in blocks of ice which would choke the life from them if not freed by their allies. Keleseth did not fight alone. Using his necromantic powers, he summoned the skeletons of Varikal to fight by his side. If heroes dispatched them, Keleseth would revive them once more. Eventually, Keleseth would no longer be able to raise the skeletons, as the heroes had dealt a decisive blow. Yelling, "I join the night," Keleseth crumpled to the floor, dead. Later in their travels around Northrend, heroes would also come into contact with Prince Taldaram. Like many of the San'layn, he sought the favour of the Lich King. In order to do this, Taldaram decided to venture to Ankahet, the Old Kingdom. Once a part of the Grand Nerubian Empire until the race was forced into servitude by the Lich King, Ankahet was now a ruin. The Old Kingdom lay deep underground, so not many Scourge had ventured this far down, fighting their war with the Nerubians a little closer to the surface. Taldaram presumed that within the Old Kingdom there may be ancient Nerubian relics with which to empower the Scourge and thus please the Lich King. Many dangers still lurked in the depths, but Taldaram was able to activate several Nerubian wards to defend himself, allowing him to search the kingdom with little distraction. Taldaram's expedition would find itself under attack by heroes drafted in to help by Nerubians that were not undead. They wanted their kingdom liberated of both the Scourge and the faceless ones that dwelt deep within. Another key factor in the Nerubians becoming slaves of the Lich King, their empire destroyed on two fronts. The heroes bested Taldaram's undead host and deactivated the wards defending the Blood Prince. In battle, Taldaram would summon giant orbs of fire, their flames lashing out at any who came near, and feed upon the blood and essence of his enemies, sometimes pinning heroes down in order to feed off of them more easily. Despite his resistance, Taldaram would meet his end in the ancient Nerubian kingdom. Months passed. Many battles were fought and many heroes were lost. But eventually, the forces of the Alliance and Horde found themselves at the very gates of the Lich King's domain. One of the sections of the citadel they raided was the San'layn's Crimson Hall. Not long after venturing into the hall, adventurers were met by the leader of the Darkfallen faction, Lanathel. Before her lay three corpses, those of Keleseth, Valanar, and Taldaram. Using an orb of blood-like energy, the Queen was able to raise the 3 Blood Princes yet again to serve her and the Lich King. The Blood Prince Council's main objective now was to defend their Queen from attack. In combat, each prince specialised their magic. Valanar created vortexes and kinetic explosions, Taldaram summoned flames that would hone in on targets, and Keleseth attacked with the shadow. There was also a further complication for the heroes. The orb would increase the power of its host, giving more potency to the prince's magical arsenal whom it lay within. The orb did not stay in one place and would switch between the Blood Princes to further confuse the council's attackers. The heroes did not falter, and after a hard-fought battle once again sent the princes to their graves for a 3rd time. Their journey to the Blood Queen had now become a lot easier. So, there you have it, the lore behind the Blood Prince Council, which make up many of the Knights of the Frozen Throne neutral legendaries. Which cards do you most want covered from Knights? I hope you enjoyed. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this wherever you can. That'd be really appreciated. If you didn't enjoy, then hit the dislike button, I guess. You do you, buddy. If you enjoyed the art, I've credited the artists in the description below. Should be unveiling a new lore series soon, so I'm eager to see what you all think about it. To get details on this, follow us on Twitter and Facebook, and to catch any streams, which I will start doing more regularly soon, I promise, go give us a follow on Twitch. Until next time, happy Hearthstoning.